Tulad ng pangako natin, babalikan natin itong issue na ito. Especially itong column by Jairus Bondok from the Philippine Star kung saan diniscuss na in very much detail, no? Yung some of the questions raised about the technical aspects of the transmission of the results of nung elections ng 2022. Particularly yung concern about uh, at least yung criticism about the supposed integrity of the transmission logs and whether properly na-preserve yung mga yan para ma-double check kung talagang legit yung buong proseso. Again, just to be clear, these are just allegations. These are just skepticisms and critics being raised, but obviously they're worth discussing in light of the fact that of course marami sa ating mga kababayan are still not very much settled on the results of last year's elections, and there's many people who say bakit parang bigla ang bilis yung pasok ng mga election results. Now this is very important because remember when Marcos Jr. himself was questioning his election loss in 2016, his camp also raised some concerns about the disparities in terms of transmission of results from certain parts of the country, and the allegations back then, which was of course struck down by the Supreme Court not once, not twice, I think three times, no, was that the discrepancies in the transmission, the chronology, among others, supposedly suggested that Lenny Robredo's camp was benefiting from unfair structural advantage because back then the incumbent, of course, was the outgoing administration of the late President Aquino. Remember, so yun yung line of attack before, not this one of the lines of attacks against Lenny Robredo's victory in 2016. So now we kind of have the kind of converse mirror situation of that kung saan ang sinasabi naman ng kabilang ngayon is wait lang, parang nung nanalo naman kayo this year at natalo si Lenny, parang ang bilis din yung transmission or the way the transmission was coming in did not follow a specific kind of expectations based on supposedly certain technical and other kind of analysis, no, other kind of analysis. So yun po yung konteksto ng ating discussion. We're not here to cast doubt necessarily on the result of the elections. As you know, mga kameta, I consistently argued last year now when it comes to the result of the elections, it was very much reflective of some of the trend lines we saw in the more legitimate authoritative surveys that were coming out, whether this was the SWS survey, whether this was the Pulse Asia survey, among others. And of course, as you know, I was very quite critical of the whole Google Trends overemphasized. As I said, Google Trends could be helpful in certain way in terms of reflecting the level of excitement and enthusiasm about a campaign, but it does not necessarily suggest voter preference. So to be very clear about it, we're not doing this vlogs in order to necessarily question the result of the election. Nevertheless, mga kameta, we have a very interesting situation here because you have at least two former members of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, including one former colonel, one former general, deputy chief of AFP, who also happens to be, so I'm talking about General Rio, who also happens to be the former undersecretary and acting secretary of the Department of Information Communication Technology. So we have relatively high level people from military technical background, in the case of Rio from engineering, electrical engineer background, who are raising some of these concerns. Now, ibang usapan kung whether, we can debate about the validity of their criticism, but they're raising certain criticism that has caught the attention of one of the leading columnists in the country, and that's Jarius Bondok. Sorry, Jarius Bondok. Now, I want to go into this, mga kameta, also because, remember, we had an interesting situation last year kung saan si then Vice President Lenny Robredo, did not legally challenge the results, but she came out with quite an interesting intervention. Parang ayon sa kanya, she called on her followers to accept the results. At the same time, Lenny said something along the lines of, well, as much as we have to accept the results, let's also scrutinize if ever there are some anomalies, etc. Ito. So, just to be very clear about it. So, ito po yung sinabi ni Lenny Robredo last year, no? Ito mismo yung sinabi niya. Kaya nga sabi ko, mahalaga yan, balikan natin yan. Because Lenny herself, di ba, noon, noon pa lang sabi ni Lenny na hmm, na maybe if ever there are anomalies or there are concerns raised later on, then bigyan natin ng pansin yan. So ito yung sinabi niya last May 10. So back then, Vice President Lenny Robredo, sorry, hindi alam ko na i-glasses ko. Saan na i-glasses ko? Back then, Vice President Lenny Robredo assured Filipinos on Tuesday, this was of course back in May, that she would accept whatever would be the final results of the 2022 presidential race, while she urged her supporters to do the same. But she said her camp would still check on issues being raised about the conduct of the elections. No? Ayon sa kanya, so for me, what I wish for now while we are grieving, while some of us still could not believe the result of the elections, whatever the final results will be, let's accept them. Let's accept them because this will be the source of strength that we all can share. No? So this is the stance. I am not saying we'll not pay attention to the problem being relayed to us. I suppose some of these issues that we're discussing now. What I mean is there's a bigger fight. Our fight does not end with the elections. Many eyes were open, many minds woke up. The fight continues. The fight here is not just a fight to win the elections, but a fight that aims to make ourselves of efforts to achieve a good kind of governance in our country. Ayon din sa kanya, I hope there are no regrets in our hearts and minds. We know we did everything, all the industriousness, all the sacrifices. Probably most likely she was talking about the volunteers, especially not only me, but most of all you. I saw what you offered to these elections. I hope what we offered we can bring to the bigger fight we have to face. So she's saying that the fight for democracy will be a long-term kind of challenge. Eventually, of course, she garnered around 15 million votes, but a good number of her supporters have raised questions about that. Now, interestingly, the other day, Lenny Robredo, she had also nakita ko yan, meron siyang interview with ABS-CBN kung saan pinag-usapan niya also about how angat buhay, how other parallel efforts of civic activism, how her interventions and speeches across the country, including during, speeches to different universities and graduates, that she's trying to help a lot of people to get through the grieving process and to go beyond despondency and despair. Yun po yung interview ni former Vice President Lenny Robredo the other day sa ABS-CBN. I'm trying to just bring it out because she had some... Okay. Yeah, this is March 29, no? Post lang natin yan mga kameta para makita niyo. As I said again, of course, with Lele Claudio the other day, we had this podcast about discussing whether there's a crisis of opposition. I had my own separate vlog kung saan pinag-usapan ko the necessity about a kind of a post-mortem proper reflection paper analysis of what went right and what went wrong. Now, interestingly, at the same time, Lenny Robredo had this interview with ANC, ABS-CBN. So I suggest you guys check it out. It's quite an interesting one, and it's always interesting to see what the former vice president has to say about this. So ayon kay Lenny Robredo, there was a light that was sparked in her supporters' heart and encouraged them to channel their grief positively when she lost in the 2022 national elections by establishing what was once a program under vice presidency Angat Boy Foundation. Again, I like this because the emphasis there is positive channeling of grief, which is precisely what I've been saying for the past few months or so, which is yung so cappuccino to, okay. Cappuccino. Alam niyo naman, necesidad. Cappuccino. No, the reason I talk about this mga kameta is because as I said, diba, yung toxic style ng mga anonymous bloggers na supposedly pro-Lenny, etc. It's not helping anyone. Yung pathetic attempts nila to try to cancel out Vico or cancel me, like anong gusto yung mangyari, diba? You're like, you wanna get, you know what I'm saying? Right? It's like a lightweight taking on heavyweights. Like, it's not gonna work, my friend. So, pathetic, yung ganyan toxicity, no? Yung attempts to try to cancel other people. And then there's some charlatans there na pa-intellect, etc. while trying to also, yung style na everything this admin does is automatically wrong kind of attitude, etc. Which kind of makes half of their analysis laughable. So what Lenny is saying, let's not go for toxic process of denialisms, for the toxic process of just attacking anyone who doesn't buy exactly our version of things or your version of things, especially more hardline supporters. Don't go out there and alienating people and trying to cancel people right and left. And I would say, it doesn't make sense. How can you cancel others when hindi na kayo ganun ka-relevant, diba? But going back to this, mga kameta, I like how Vice President Robredo emphasized the need for positive channeling of grief and why you have to get into civic activism, etc. Although, sabi ko, it has to go more than that. We have to have a reflection about what she believes, went right, went wrong, what are the things she has to build on. I don't know, maybe they want to do surprise later on again, just like what they did last time. But again, you need preparations when it comes to these things. And sometimes mga last minute, 11th hour tatay style kind of, I'll run for president, etc. I'm not sure about that, diba? Whether it can work. But then again, we hear of no less than the former vice president telling her supporters to positively channel whatever frustrations, concerns they have. At the same time, you have also the vice president, right, saying a year earlier, no, na if there are some concerns being raised with the election results, then tignan natin, right? So I want to also see what does the vice president have, former vice president and attorney Larry Robredo have to say about this. Now, let's go to what Jarius has been saying. Lang, ba't nawala dito? Basahin natin yung sinasabi niya. Second, mga kameta, hanapin ko lang yung glasses ko. Wala na, Zadi na. Ayan. Ayan. Ito. So, basahin natin itong article ni Jarius. Ayan, dyan naman meron, di ba? Okay. Wait na, check ko nga. Dyan pa ba kaya? Baka mamaya wala na naman itong connection natin. Alam niyo naman kung ano nangyari dito. Anyway, ayan na, nagka-comment yung iba na bakit si Trillanes din na ex-military does that necessarily making blah blah blah. Yan na yung mga trollers. Ito nagbabasa lang ako itong sinasabi ni Jarius, no? And then pag-usapan natin what's the implication of this. So ito, basahin natin yung kay Jarius. I'm just reading what he's saying, okay? Okay, magalit. Relax lang. Chill lang. Okay. At least you can read the first paragraphs yourself here. Okay. Alright. Basahin natin. So, COMELEC finally gave retired Colonel Leonardo Odonio, ito yung PMA Class 64, transmission logs of election 2022. Just for those who are interested, ito po yung tinutukoy na complainant or plaintiff. Just to give you a background, you can check the background of these persons on your own. Alright? Wala naman dito eh. Ito. So, ito yung kernel na tinutukoy ni Jarius. No? One second, ayusin natin dito. Ayan. Parang gulo na. Ayan natin dito. Okay. Ayan. So, just to give you a background about what's going on here. Okay? Alright, basahin natin. So finally, yung COMELEC, di ba, yung Supreme Court called on the COMELEC to provide yung transmission logs para ma-double check kung may anomalya or hindi. Di ba? Ito. So, COMELEC finally gave retired Colonel Leonardo Odonio transmission logs of election 22 pressing results. Chairman George Garcia released it Thursday, March 23, quote, to quell suspicion of poll fraud. Nevertheless, si Odonio ay hindi masyado sang-ayon dito. Odonio at once saw irregularities in the logs. Ito yung ayon kay Jarius, I'm just reading it. As early as 7:08 to 7:10 p.m. of May 9, 332 distant precincts had transmitted results to Manila's transparency server. By 7:17 p.m., there were 1,525,637 votes for president. Incredible, questionable. Parang yun ang sinasabi dito. COMELEC General Instructions 10727 of November 10, 2020 required all 166,000 precincts to close only at 7 p.m. Voters within 30 meters at that time were to be let in to cast ballots. In the unlikelihood that all registrants had voted earlier, precincts were to stay open 7 for legitimate voters where slots could have been used by fakes. The three-man board of election inspectors then announces closely. Party watchers and observers gather around the vote counting machine. The BAI performs 9 tasks under COMELEC General Instructions. The first is considered BAI authenticating key passwords in the VCM, touching, closing voting on the screen. Okay, all of the Blah processing. Longest is task 7, printing 8 copies of the election return. So essentially, it's just in-explain na gaano ka-komplikado at multi-level yung kailangan gagawin dito, ba? Na medyo cumbersome yan. Containing the votes of all 348 candidates for national and local position plus 27 precinct information lines. Each ER takes 2.51, roughly 3 minutes to print. Barring any paper snags and roll changing, all 8 copies take around 20 minutes. Right? Again, so this is the breakdown of the logistics part. So last 2 tasks, preparing electronic device and transmission to Smart Globe or DITO, total for all 9 tasks, 30 minutes. So more than 30 minutes it will take from tapos na yung voting and then yung ayusin mo na lahat and then so ayon kay Adonio, he wants Comelec to demonstrate how precincts can transmit within 8 to 17 minutes from closing. What he contends should take around 32 minutes. So how was the time cut to almost half, if not a quarter? No. So how did we go from what is supposed to take around 32 minutes, all of these tasks that are mentioned here, and then wala pang 8 to 17 minutes, boom, nakapasok lahat. By 8:02 p.m. last May 9, the transparent service showed 20 million votes, 38% of votes cast. Here's another discrepancy ayon kay article ni Jarius. Transmission logs that Comelec gave Odoni and posted on his website March 24th state 20,676,855 votes at 8:02 p.m. And this is where papasok naman si retired General Eleksyon was disputing the physical impossibility of 20 million plus votes within an hour of closing. As Information Communication Technology Secretary in 2019, siya po yung nag-chair ng Comelec Advisory Committee for that year's midterm elections. Time and motion exercise shows that ERs trickled in the first 2 hours, peak at one point, then dwindled. But what Jarvis is arguing is that in May 22, votes peak within 1 hour. Okay? A first Philippines elections or elsewhere, sabi ni Rio, medyo sarcastic yata. Comelec showed that in automatic election of 2010, 2013, 2016, 2010, votes peak only after the second hour. So parang bilis. Peak came at first hour rather than second hour. Yung po yung sinasabi ni General Rio. Last October 18, Garcia publicized Comelec's accumulative VCM log showing votes peaking after the second hour, 9:30 p.m. So, yung isa, sinasabi na, bakit parang first hour parang nag-peak? And then later on, the other evidence suggests bakit second hour nag-peak? Medyo. So, another statistical infeasibility tayo kay Jairus Bondok were presidential and VP standings. Quoting Rio. An electrical engineer and former AFP Deputy of Research and Development. So, si Marco Jr. daw was leading with 60% of the votes as early as 7:17 and 8:02 p.m. till end of counting. Robredo stayed at 29% throughout, followed by Pacquiao, Moreno, Lacson. So, was the transparency necessary conditioning? So, yung argument here was conditioning na parang may proportional breakdown na yan. Same with the candidates race. Yung sinasabi na parang bakit ganyan. Alright, so I suggest you guys really read this. Ayon naman kay Odonio, tuloy ang laban, so they're gonna continue to question the results. So, to simplify it mga kameta, parang sinasabi dito is parang ang bilis masyado yung transmission compared to what is technically expected and what is the historical trend. At the same time, parang ang bilis din ng transmission because it usually takes at least 32 minutes or more than 32 minutes actually to do all of the basic 9 tasks before you go from the casting of the votes to the transmission. Parang 8 to 7 minutes pa lang nandyan na. So, hindi lang mabilis yung transmission within first hour nag-peak daw, but also a lot of tasks were done a little bit too argumented dito sa parang bilis, diba? And this is defying technical and historical technical expectations and historical precedents. So, siguro we have to wait again to be fair for explanation from Comelec about this timing issue. So, ngayon na binigyan ng transmission logs, the other thing that perhaps should be explained properly to the public to avoid any kind of suspicion and any kind of fake news, disinformation, or some would even say legitimate concerns, what has to be done here is to explain bakit yung task expected na 30 minutes done, nagawa within 8 minutes to just over 50 minutes. No, is the case that mabilis na natapos na yung voting, or more efficient na ngayon that they were so well rehearsed yung mga Comelec people that the transmission could happen so fast? Tignan natin yan, alright? So again, I'm not passing a final judgment. Let's still see what are the explanation about this? Because for me, Meta, whether you're pro Marcos, whether you're pro Lenny, etc., it is always important to have, well, it's not only important, it's essential for us to have confidence, basic confidence, in the integrity of our elections, right? Remember, for a very, very long time, mga kameta, ang laking concern sa atin is yung debate about dapat ba babalik tayo sa manual, no? Dapat ba babalik tayo sa manual? Is that the way forward? For me, hindi. Diyos ko, kung maalala niyo yung panahon ni Arroyo, yung mga manual count, etc., ang gulo, di ba? Sobrang gulo yung time na yan. So, no, I don't think going back to manual will make things better. What I think is important is more explanation, technical explanation, and more transparency and more scrutiny of automated elections until we are both psychologically, technically, legally comfortable with the idea. And as I said, yan ang problema natin. In 2016, one camp was attacking the other camp, raising concerns with the speed of transmission, especially, or delaying transmission from certain parts of the country, and therefore supposedly hindi sila natalo, pero nadayaan sila. Now, 2022, medyo nag-reverse. The other camp is saying para ang bilis masyadong transmission. It's not a question of delay, pero ang masyadong bilis ng transmission, masyadong mabilis parang yung na-tick yung mga boxes, all of the basic tasks before the results were transmitted, and parang masyadong bilis nag-peak yung transmission within first hour when you expect around second hour dapat mangyari yan. So, all of these things do not help, I think, in terms of really creating a widespread sense of confidence in the integrity for elections. Now, it happened that in these elections, the gap was a little bit too big. You're looking at 15 million versus 31 million. But had this been a race na super close, 15.5 million versus 16 million or even 17 million, then this kind of concerns with alleged irregularities and anomalies could have raised really serious post-election political instability concerns. I think what happened here is because the gap was so big and because a lot of surveys were showing that the gap would be big, the results did not come off as too unbelievable to the vast majority of Filipinos. That's why if you look at for instance, what surveys suggest, majority of Filipinos accepted the result of the elections. You don't see massive protests against Marcos Jr. And as far as the surveys are concerned, it looks like Marcos has a pretty high, decent approval rating. And then, of course, as I said, Lena Robredo herself said accept the results. She said she'll check the issues, but we didn't see any follow-up by her camp in terms of really questioning whether legitimating result of elections or not. I'm sure everyone has their own theories about it, including conspiracy theories, but we're just here to have this proper discussion about the issue because, as I said, dapat talagang walang bahit na duda, especially dun sa technical part. So, hintayin po natin yung sasabihin ng COMELEC, anong maging counter-explanation nila dito sa sinasabi na bakit parang masyadong mabilis and why the tasks that took 30 minutes were done in supposedly 8 minutes or so. Maybe the explanation of COMELEC would be a lot of pressings actually were finished early on, or they already got the ball rolling early on, or that they got enough training and enough familiarity with the process that they could do it in 9 minutes, 10 minutes rather than 30 minutes. So let's look at those explanations because it's important for us not to also for the other version of this information, right? We have to approach everything in a scientific, evidence-based manner and not jump to the conclusions. But as I said, if you have a number of people with some relevant technical background are raising some concerns, and you have leading columnists like Charis Bundok, bring this to public mainstream discussion, then I think the least we can do is to basahin natin. At saka talagang masinsinan na pagsusuri talagang kailangan natin dito. Again, all of these are allegations and we still have to discuss yan ng gusto kagabi is because waiting for still more results to come in from other people, including other experts, columnists, but parang wala. Wala rin response from the Lenny Robredo camp or people close to her, so let's wait for that maybe. It's an interesting thing to talk about. Because remember, yung case ni Marcos Jr. and Lenny, tumagal yan ng sobrang, di ba, ilang years na 5 years? Or more, di ba? Hanggang ngayon, hindi nila tanggap yung talo nila 2016. Now, to say to the other side, now move on na kayo, and have some people raising some of these technical concerns, right? Surprise, surprise, with the kind of results with the kind of response that we're seeing. Alright, mga kameta, thank you very much for this. I really appreciate it. Lahat ng mga nagbigay ng comments and suggestions. Really, really kind of you. Ang dami natin mga supporters din dito sa YouTube. Really appreciate it. As always, very, very kind of you.